Everyone knows Princess Leonor is the future Queen of Spain. The military graduate. The girl in the naval whites, the girl who flew a plane alone at 20 years old, the heir with the perfect smile and the perfect posture. That is the version of Leonor that gets packaged for magazine covers and royal fan pages. It is true, as far as it goes. But it is not the whole picture. Because underneath the ceremony and the uniforms, there is a set of facts about Leonor's position that Spain has never hidden exactly, but has also never advertised. Facts that complicate the story of an unstoppable, uncontested heir. Today we are going to talk about what those facts actually are, and why they matter more than any tabloid rumor ever could. Let's start with the one that would surprise most people watching this video right now. Princess Leonor is not, technically, guaranteed to become queen. Not because of scandal, not because of politics in the way you might assume, but because of the plain text of Spanish succession law. Spain's constitution, specifically Article 57, still contains what is called male preference primogeniture. It means that if King Felipe were to have a legitimate son, at any point, that son would leap over Leonor in the line of succession. She would go from heir apparent back to infanta, a princess with no claim to the throne, just as she was for the first 8 years of her life before her father became king. This is not some obscure clause buried in legal footnotes. It has been part of open political discussion in Spain for over a decade. There have been repeated proposals to change the law to absolute primogeniture, meaning the eldest child inherits regardless of sex, full stop. Spain already made that switch for its titles of nobility back in 2009. But for the actual crown, the law has never been amended. Every time reform has been floated, it has stalled, in part because Leonor's own birth, followed by her sister Sophia's, diffused the political urgency. Why rewrite a law for a hypothetical son when the family already has an heir? The result is a strange kind of limbo. Leonor is being trained, at enormous public expense and personal cost, to be the first reigning queen of Spain since Isabella II in the 1800s. And yet the legal foundation under her feet has a trapdoor built into it that nobody has bothered to seal. It's not a secret in the sense that anyone is hiding it. It's a secret in the sense that nobody puts it on the magazine cover. Now let's go back to the very beginning, to November of 2005, because this is where the second thread starts. When Leonor was born, doctors extracted the stem cells from her umbilical cord, which is a fairly routine medical practice today. What was not routine, and what caused real debate inside Spain at the time, was where those stem cells went. They were not sent to a public blood bank inside the country. They were sent to a private facility in Tucson, Arizona, in the United States. When her sister Sophia was born 2 years later, the family split the decision, sending one sample to a public Spanish blood bank and another to a private one abroad. At the time, this raised uncomfortable questions. Public cord blood banks exist specifically so that stem cells can be available to anyone who needs a match, not just the family that banked them. Choosing a private, foreign, for-profit facility for the future head of state's own daughter looked, to critics, like the royal family quietly opting out of a public system while asking the Spanish public to fund their institution. It was covered in Spanish press at the time, argued about, and then largely faded from view outside Spain entirely. Most international audiences have simply never heard it. It is a small detail, but it tells you something bigger. Even in the most private, most human moment of a royal birth, there was already a tension between what the family did for itself and what it represented to the country funding it. The third thread is heavier, and it involves the man whose shadow still falls over every step Leonor takes in public. Her grandfather, Juan Carlos I, the king who oversaw Spain's transition to democracy after Franco, spent decades as one of the most respected monarchs in Europe. Then, starting around 2018, a wave of financial scandals broke open, allegations involving undeclared income, offshore accounts, and gifts from foreign governments that Spanish prosecutors began investigating. In 2020, Juan Carlos left Spain for the United Arab Emirates, an exile that has never been framed as anything other than voluntary, but which nobody inside or outside the palace has ever described as anything but necessary. Since then, the working royal family, Felipe, Letizia, and their daughters, have maintained a carefully calculated distance from him. Public appearances involving Juan Carlos and his granddaughters have been rare, brief, and stage-managed with obvious caution. When he has returned to Spain for occasional events, Leonor's presence, or more often her absence, has been read by Spanish press as a signal of exactly how much daylight the institution wants between its future and its past. This is the part of the story that gets the least attention in English-language content about Leonor, because it is not glamorous and it does not fit the fairy tale. But it is arguably the single biggest structural risk to the monarchy's long-term credibility. Leonor is being built up as the clean, modern, disciplined future of the Spanish crown, precisely because the institution needs a counterweight to the scandal her grandfather left behind. Every uniform she wears, every academy she completes, every disciplined public statement, exists partly to answer a question Juan Carlos raised in the first place: can this family be trusted with the role? Which brings us to the fourth thing, the one that should probably concern the royal family most, and gets discussed the least outside Spain. Public support for the monarchy is not what most outside observers assume it to be. There is a long-running academic research project out of the University of Murcia, led by Professor Antonia Martinez, that has tracked Spanish attitudes toward the crown for years, and the polling it produces regularly shows something far more fragile than the ceremonial pageantry would suggest. Depending on the survey wave, support for the monarchy versus support for a republic in Spain has, at various points, been closer to an even split than a landslide. Younger Spaniards in particular show markedly less automatic loyalty to the institution than older generations who remember the transition to democracy directly. This matters enormously for Leonor, because her entire public role, the military training, the multilingual speeches, the disciplined image, is in large part an attempt to manufacture legitimacy for an institution that can no longer simply assume it. Previous generations of Spanish royals didn't need to actively earn public approval in the same way. Leonor does. Every step of her military service, every polished appearance, every carefully worded speech in Spanish, Catalan, and English, is happening against the backdrop of a country where a meaningful chunk of the population is genuinely undecided about whether they want a monarchy at all in 20 years. So when you put these four things together, the succession law loophole, the private overseas cord blood decision, the institutional distancing from Juan Carlos, and the closer than expected public opinion numbers, you get a much more complicated picture than the one usually presented. Leonor is not simply gliding toward a guaranteed throne on a wave of public adoration. She is navigating a legal system that could theoretically remove her claim overnight, a family history that includes a grandfather living in exile under a cloud of financial scandal, and a public that is far more divided about the value of the crown itself than royal coverage tends to admit. None of this makes her sympathetic or unsympathetic. It simply makes her situation more precarious, and more interesting, than the highlight reel suggests. Every parade wave and every graduation photo is happening on top of a foundation with real cracks in it. What's remarkable, honestly, is how little any of this seems to show on Leonor herself. Whatever pressure comes with knowing your legal claim to the throne technically depends on your father not having a son, whatever weight comes with representing an institution still recovering from your own grandfather's scandal, whatever awareness she carries of polling numbers that aren't guaranteed to swing in the monarchy's favor, none of it shows up in the discipline she has brought to 3 years of military training across the Army, Navy, and Air Force. That contrast, between a genuinely uncertain institutional future and a genuinely disciplined personal performance, is probably the truest version of who Leonor is right now. Not a fairy tale princess with a guaranteed crown waiting for her. A 20-year-old doing the work in front of her, inside a system that has never fully resolved what it wants to be. If there is a real secret here, it isn't a scandal or a hidden affair or some tabloid fantasy. It's simply that Spain built its modern monarchy on foundations more contested and more fragile than the ceremonial version ever lets on, and Leonor is the one who has to carry that weight forward, whether the law, her family history, or the Spanish public ultimately decide to make it easy for her or not. Thank you for watching. If this kind of deeper look into what actually shapes the Spanish royal family is the kind of content you want more of, consider subscribing, and let me know in the comments which of these 4 threads surprised you the most.